the car up now. You want to jack up from the front. And usually when you have a lowered car, you can't get the jack all the way under to get to the cross member. So you're going to jack it up right here on the bottom at the radiator support. I'll show you when I get it jacked up. You want to jack it up enough to get the jack stands under, and then you can get to the cross member after that. Coming underneath the car here, you can see where I have the jack right there on the bottom of the radiator support to jack it up. It needs to be jacked up right there at the cross member, right behind the oil pan there. That's where you need to jack it up from the rest of the way. You're going to want to get a jack stand at this point here. As you can see mine, it's all dented in here where people have been jacking up from the side. You cannot jack them up from the side. If you do, you'll smash that in and dent it all in there because you're putting too much load on this corner here. But that's your jack spots there. Right there and right here. That's where you want to put your jack stands. When you're jacking up from the back, you want to put the jack on the differential, which I'll show you that in a minute when we get to that. I'm only going 4 clicks up right now. Of course, if you're going to work under the car, you'll want to go higher than this. As you can see, I have the jack on the bottom of the differential. If you have stock wheels with stock lug nuts, they're 21mm, and you would want to break them loose before you jack the car. Since I have an impact gun, I'm going to go ahead and take them off in the air. First thing you're going to want to do to take your front shocks off is remove the little tab here on your brake line. Just take a flathead screwdriver and a hammer and knock it off. Be real gentle with it, don't tear it up because you're going to have to reuse this. Looks just like this. Make sure you shoot all your nuts and bolts with WD-40, PB Blaster, whatever you want to use. Let it all sit for a little while so they'll come off a little easier, especially if your car is stock like mine is. After you have that off, you can just take the brake line and get it off the shock. It should pull down this way and then come out of the hole and then pull it up out of the hole. Just like that. And then it'll be released. Next you have two 17mm bolts with two 17mm nuts. Probably going to use a breaker bar on these because they're probably stuck on there really good. Then after you have your two 17mm bolts and nuts loosened up down there but still installed, go ahead and remove your three 14mm nuts. Don't take the last one off, leave one on. You go ahead and remove the 17mm bolts and nuts on the bottom now. Also, when you're going to jack your car up, make sure you have both sides jacked up and on jack stands. You can't just pick one side up and leave one side on the ground because there'll be too much load on it. You won't be able to get your shock off and get the other one back on. Make sure you keep all the bolts and nuts together with each other. If you got them off, go up top, hold your shock up, take your last nut off, and then bring the shock down. When you get it off, your knuckle and everything is going to lay over like this, and to keep from tearing up your tie rod bushing over here, you want to put a jack underneath the rotor right here, just to hold it up so it don't lay over. And you don't want to leave it like that for a long amount of time. Okay, now we're going to have to remove the shock mount here that holds the shock on the car. We're going to have to reuse this. So what we're going to do is use some spring compressors. Take a compress the spring so we can get it off. You can get these at any hardware store, probably about 50 bucks. Want one on each side. You just want to do a little bit on each side at a time. That should be enough to get it off. Next you got to pull the cap off the top. This little plastic cap pops right off. And next you have a nut on top of the shock. Best way to tell if you got your spring compressed enough is grab the top mount and see if it's wobbly. If it is, then it's loose enough. Go ahead and take your nut off the top here. It will jump back out if you don't have it compressed just enough, but it's not that big a deal. As you see, it just shot out and was not a lot of force. After you get that off, go ahead and take your compressors off your spring. Next, you're going to want to remove, if it's still in good shape, the piece of rubber that goes around the spring here. You want to reuse that on your new springs. It keeps the noise down on the top and the bottom. And if yours are in bad shape or you don't have any, you could take some electrical tape, wrap it around a couple times on the bottom, right where it sits on the shock, and you should be good with that. But I highly recommend using this if you can. Next, on your shock, you have your bump stop. You want to go ahead and pull that off. And that's off. You're going to want to cut this down to put it back on your new one. On your new springs, they're going to be lowered, so they're going to be smaller, and you're going to have as much travel. You're going to want to cut your bump stop off so it can go down a little further, but you definitely want to use a bump stopper, else you'll bottom out. And that could be bad for your shock and your spring. I'm using the KYB AGXs. These are used, but they're still in great shape. They have a stamp on the side here, the L or a R for left or right, which the driver's side's left and the passenger side's right. And I also got the iBock Pro kit. I got these used too off of a forum. Pretty good deal on them. This is the iBock, this is the stock. You can see how much shorter the iBock is than the stock. Fronts. Okay, next we're going to cut the bump stop. It actually had the dust boot on it. Of course, this was deteriorated and gone to bad. But we're going to cut it right here. We're just going to have this part right here left. Sawzall is much quicker. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just the bump stop, that's all it is. I'm going to go ahead and put your rubber sleeves on the string. Slides right on there. This one here is deteriorated, so I'm going to put some electrical tape around it to hold it on better. Okay, now we're going to take the shock. We're going to put the bump stop on the shock. If you want to, you can go ahead and replace the dust boot that goes on there, get a new one, or use your stock one if it's still good. Next, we'll go ahead and put the spring on the shock. You have the right end of eyeball on here, pointing upward. You basically have a stopping point on your shock here for your spring. You can turn it backwards and turn it forwards, and it's going to stop right there. That's where it's going to stop. That's where it needs to sit at. And as you can see how far we're going to compress the spring down to get all the way down to get the top hat on. Get the top hat on there, and then get the shock mount on top of it. Now we'll go ahead and put the spring compressors on, the spring. When you're putting these on, you want to make sure you're going to have enough room to get the top hat on there after you get it compressed down enough. Then you want to check your top hat, see if it's going to fit yet. But there is a notch on the top hat right here. This little notch right here in the top hat goes towards the car. So it points in towards the engine rather than the outside of the car. And on your shock, you have your two bolt hole locations here. Those are pointing out toward the car, so the slot is going to go on this side. That's how you know you have your mount on there right. As you can see, you have a washer with a tab on it. The tab goes in the hole, and the washer goes down on the shock. But as you can see, the shock on top has a cut-off part on top. The flat side of the washer goes on that. So you have to turn the shaft towards the hole, like so. That's how it goes on there. Next, you want to take your mount, sit it on top. There's no certain way it goes because it spins. They say to replace these nuts every time you replace your shocks or springs or whatever. I don't have another one right now, so I'm just going to reuse this one. Also, when it's going on, as you see, the top hat's going to want to turn on you. You got to keep it in the right place. Shaft is going to continue to spin around on you. then it'll get a catch on it. You'll be able to tighten with that. It'll eventually come back loose again. So when you get it snug down on there, you can torque it later after you get the spring compressors off. Make sure everything's leveled up. Like I say, you got the notch on the top hat right here, which is on the opposite side of your bolt holes, because your bolt holes port outside the car. Your notch points to the engine bay. After all that's on, make sure your spring on the bottom is sitting in the seat properly on the shock. Then remove your spring compressors. Continue watching your spring. Make sure it's not moving on you and release them evenly on both sides. If you got that, go ahead and pull your compressors off. And this shock and spring is finished, ready to install. Also, you can reuse these plastic top caps if you want to. These are adjustable dampers, so you won't be able to see it anymore, but it'll keep it clean on the inside, and you pop it off whenever you want to adjust it, or you can just leave it off for looks of the adjustable damper. Whatever you want to do on that. Okay, now we can go ahead and install the new shock and spring combo. Bring in the bottom underneath the brake line without hitting or tearing the brake line. Bring it up. You want to line the mount up, top mount up with holes up here. Get it up in there. Take one of the nuts, thread it on. Go ahead and thread all 3 nuts on. Get them snug on there. Once you have that on, you want to put the shock onto the knuckle now. Just going to pick up on it. Use your leg. You take a bolt. Get it started on there. After you got that on there, push the whole thing back. Install the top bolt on. Go ahead and thread your nuts on. 2 17mm nuts, as well as 2 17mm bolts. I'm going to go ahead and snug these up. I'm not going to tighten them up, we're just going to snug them because we got to torque it later. You can go up top and snug down all 3 of your 14mm nuts. Just snug them, don't torque them either because we'll torque them later. Okay, now you're going to take your brake cable and install it onto the shock. And bring it down like that. Bring this part right here behind the bracket and up into it. It's almost like a nut on the back of it that'll slide up into the back of it. Hold it in place so it doesn't move side to side. After you get that on, and you want to install your clamp back on, which it has a little top of it right there, the little lip on it that goes on top, pointing outward. Tap that on. Okay, that's on. Okay, your 17mm bolts and nuts are torqued to 84 to 98 foot-pounds. Use your own judgment on that. I'm going with 95 foot-pounds on mine. Your top three 14mm nuts are torqued to 29 to 40 foot-pounds. Again, use your own judgment on that. I'm going with 39 foot-pounds. And your 17mm nut on the inside is torqued to 43 to 58 foot-pounds. I'm going to go 56 on mine. Okay, on your S14, these two bolts and nuts here are 90 to 112 foot-pounds torque. Your three 14mm bolts on top on the S14 is 29 to 40 foot-pounds of torque. And then your 17mm nut on top is 43 to 58 foot-pounds on the S14. On the hatchback car, to access your top mount for your rear shocks, you need to pull this piece of carpet out. Pops off like that, and you have a rubber boot right here. You can pick up on it and pull it out. Then you have two 12mm nuts in here. Go ahead and take them out. I'll go ahead and loosen this nut all the way to the top, but do not take it off. This will be the last one you take off. You take the whole shock off. Also, be extra careful, not drop them down in here. We actually have to pull the whole thing out and pull the side pieces out and everything and get it out. Which most of you probably don't have any interior in your car anyways. Okay, next you have a 17mm nut right here on the bottom of your shock. So I'm holding it on the bottom. Definitely want to use a breaker bar on this. Like I said before, you definitely want to shoot all this stuff with WD-40 or PB Blaster before you go removing it all. Let it all sit for a little while, or else it's going to be really hard to get off. You're going to have a 17mm nut, and you're going to have a washer. It's concaved on this side. which points out away from the shock. Next, you're just going to want to push the shock off of the knuckle. It's spring loaded, so it will pop up just a little bit, but not much. As you can see right there, it was not much at all. Before you pull it off the stud completely, you can go ahead and remove your 12mm nut up top, and then the shock will come out completely. After you got your last nut off up there, just push down on your arm here and pull the shock off the knuckle completely. You gotta work it off the top mount off. You have to bring it down and work it out. The top of the Ruka. This is a rear control arm, rear upper control arm, which is known as a Ruka. So you just want to bring it out the top of that. Okay, now on the backs, right, press the spring again. Same deal as the front. Okay, now we got to get the 14mm nut off the top. There's a little slot on top of the actual shaft of the shock. Take an adjustable wrench and put on it. Now before you go to take it off, make sure you remember where everything goes. You got a nut, you got a concave washer, where the concave is on top. You have your mount. There's also a bushing that sits on top of your shock mount. You have your rubber bushing for the bottom. You can pull the spring off the shock. And then all the things you have left on here, you have a rubber bump stop. You want to keep all this in order because it's all got to go back on the other one. You have a metal ring. You have another bump stop, which used to have the dust boot connected to it, which mine's gone and deteriorated off. Which if you want to, you can replace this, because you're going to need the bump stop off of it anyways. And that's all you need off that. Get and pull your compressors off your spring. After you got that off, you want to take your rubber sleeve off the bottom and reuse that one, just like you did on the fronts. If you want to see the difference of the new ones, this is the iBox Pro kit. You can see how much shorter it is than the stock one. When you're going to put your new shock back together, before you put all this stuff on, you'll notice there's a little seat on here. Basically, the rubber bushing sits on top of that and don't go down there further than past that. The metal piece will go on top of that, and then your other bushing will go on top of that. Before you put all this on, first thing you want to do is go ahead and put your rubber sleeve on the bottom here, the bottom of the spring that come off your stock one. There's nothing on the top. And you want to compress your spring, of course, just like the fronts. The back has the seat on it, just as the same as the fronts do. It stops right there on the corner. And after you have that on, you want to take your dust boot, if you have the dust boot, put it on there. Take your metal piece, put it on top of that. and put your bump stop, put it on top of that. If you don't put all three of these pieces on, when you go ahead and put it in the car and start driving, the top will start bouncing and rattling around real bad. So you definitely want to do it this way. Next thing you have here is you have to install your top mount on your spring, but you have the two bolt hole locations which go up in here, like so. But you want to try your best to get it on there, because if you go to put it on there and then you put it on the car, and then your bottom hole that bolts to the knuckle down there does not line up, you're going to have to twist the shock, and that could make the spring twist off the shock, off the seat on the bottom, which would be bad. So you want to get as close as possible, just sit the shock straight up just like it's going to be, with the adjuster pointing out towards the wheel. Put this up in there, and then bring it down onto the shock. You're probably not going to get it dead on, but you can keep trying. And probably another good way to do after you do that is take a marker and mark on the spring and the top mount, so you can get them lined up. When you go tighten it up, make sure it does not move. Okay, next thing you're going to want to do is make sure your rubber bushings on top, your concave washer with concave pointing top to the top, put it on, and then your 14mm nut, thread it on. You want to put a ratcheting wrench on, and then use an adjustable wrench on the tip of the shock. You don't want to use anything else because you'll damage this piece. You definitely don't want to damage it. While you're tightening this up, you want to make sure your spring is sitting in the seat properly. Make sure your top mount's still lined up. The torque on your 14mm nut is 13 to 17 foot-pounds. And that's the same as on the S14 as well, which I'm going to torque on by hand. It's not very much at all. Just make sure it's good and snugged up. And after you get done with that, you want to make sure your spring is sitting in the seat properly all the way to the end. Make sure your top mount is lined up with the mark you made on your spring. You can remove spring compressors. Move them evenly on both sides. Keep checking your spring and your top mount, make sure they're not moving. Your spring compressors has little hold downs on them, so they'll hold around the spring, so they won't pop off. Make sure you lock them in every time you use them. Okay, when you're going to install your rears, it comes with a paper gasket on it. If you don't have one, you can make one out of cardboard or whatever, or you don't necessarily have to have it. It just reduces noise. You want to take it, you want your adjuster to be pointing out towards the tire. If you put it the other way, you can put it pointing the other way, but it kind of binds this bushing up here, and I don't really like to bind the bushing up at all. But some people's done it before and it worked fine, but I'm going to do it this way. You want to slide it into the Ruka. Install your top mount, and then go up top and install your 17mm nuts. After you get that installed up top, you can push your arm down and get your shock installed on the stud. And twist mine just a little bit. On this side, if you have to twist it counterclockwise, it's okay because the spring's not going to go any further this way. If you had to twist it the other way, the spring could slide back. So you want to be careful with that. Just take a long extension, stick it in the hole. Don't take much. You press down on your arms. Install the shock onto the stud. The S14 has a bolt where the S13 has this stud. That'll be the difference between those two. Take your concave washer, concave pointing towards the inside of the car. 17mm nut. Your 17mm nut down here is torqued to 65 to 80 foot-pounds, and on the S14 it's 72 to 87 foot-pounds. You just want to snug it up right now because you're not going to be able to torque it down until you get the tires on the car and get the car down on the ground under load, or you won't get proper torque on it. The same goes with the front, the two 17mm bolts and nuts. You need to have them on the ground to torque them down, but without a lift it's near impossible to do. So sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But when you go to get your car aligned, get an alignment, you could ask them to torque them down for you while they have them on their lift, if you would like. Okay, now you need to go ahead and install your other 12mm nut on. Again, be very careful to not drop it down in between here. It'll be really hard to get out. You go ahead and snug them down, and the torque on them is 12 to 14 foot-pounds. Torque them down to whatever you want. I'm going to do 14 foot-pounds. Put your rubber cup back on, and then install your carpet back on, and it'll be done. Back here on the rear shocks, on the KYB AGXs, you have 1 through 8. 1 being softest, 8 being the hardest, which means number 1 is going to be really smooth ride, and number 8 is going to be a real stiff ride for track use. You turn it clockwise to stiffen it up and counterclockwise to soften it up. It is possible to continue turning it either way, but you're going to mess up your adjuster in there if you keep turning it so far. On your front shocks, you have 1 through 4, 1 being softest, 4 being stiffest. And all you got to do is take a little small screwdriver, stick it in the middle here, push it down, and then turn it clockwise to stiffen and counterclockwise to soften. You only have a 4-way adjuster on the front and an 8-way adjuster on the back. As far as the front shocks, the one on my right is the S13 and the one on my left is the S14. They're basically exactly the same except for the shaft. The S14 shaft is thicker than the S13 shaft. But at the same time, you can use either or on each car, but as far as the bump stop, you'll have to cut this one out if you're going to put the S13 bump stop on it. And if you put the S14 bump stop on the S13, it's going to be wobbly because the holes are going to be bigger. If you want to use an S14 front shock on an S13, the bolt holes are bigger on the S14 because the bolts are bigger than the S13. So what you would need to do is, what I recommend doing is using the S14 bolts and nuts and drilling out the S13 knuckle the size of the S14 bolt holes. And then if you want to use the S13 front shock on an S14, all you would need to do is drill out the bolt hole locations and use the S14 bolts and nuts. But that's the difference between them two. As far as the backs, as you can see, the S14 is a lot longer than the S13. The one on my left here is the S14, and the one on my right is the S13. So you cannot use the S13 on the S14 or the S14 on the S13 on the backs. This shock here is actually blown. The seal on it right here popped off and the gas came out of it. So one way to tell if one's bad, take the shaft, press it down. It'll go down really easily if it's blown. And also the best way to tell is it will not come back up. Some of them that's older will come up very slowly, but they will come back up. But as you see, this one is not coming up at all. So that's one way you can tell it's blown. And to replace this, just one of these rears is like 120 bucks. So definitely want to make sure your stuff's not blown if you're buying used. When you want to remove your tension rods, you have a 17mm nut on this side, and on the opposite side you have a 17mm bolt that goes through, which I will show you on this one right here. After you have those off, it'll fall down. And then down here you have two 17mm nuts here, there and there, and the one on the front here, your 14mm for your sway bar. But you only got to take these two off right here, and then your tension rod will come out. Definitely want to shoot this with some WD-40 or PV Blaster. Let it sit for a little while. And you're definitely going to want to use a breaker bar on this stuff as well. Get it all loosened up, and then we'll take the two down on the bottom off. These are 17mm nuts too. I want to tap up on it with a hammer. Go ahead and remove the nut and bolt on the front here. Probably gonna need to tap this bolt with a hammer as well. After it's out, the whole thing should come out. As far as the tension rods go, the S13 is on my right and the S14 is on my left. As you can see, the S14 is longer than the S13, so you won't be able to swap the two. But you can use the bolts if you need them. Like on the adjustable tension rods, you'll need to use stock bolts and nuts because they don't come with them in most cases. And another way to tell that your tension rod bushing is bad, like this one here, you can see the crack around it and all the juice all over it. It means it's leaking out and it's in bad shape. Okay, to get these bolts out, they're pressed in there. You can take a larger hammer, knock them out, or you can put it on a press and press them out. And it's got the other one resting on the other tension rod. There's one out. You want to be very careful doing this. You don't want to damage the threads on there. You could possibly even go ahead and thread your nut on there and hammer the nut. That one was tough to get out. A little corroded in there is what it was. That's how you get them out by hand. Of course, a press will work a whole lot easier and a whole lot better. Okay, when you're going to adjust your new adjustable tension rods, you want to get them pretty much the same length as the stock tension rods so you can drive the car to get to the line. So what you want to do is take your stock bolt, put it through the tension rod, stick it in the hole of the stock tension rod just to get that leveled out. And as you can see, it's got to come down this way, this far to match up with the bolt holes. Just take it and turn it down. It's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be dead on, but you can get as close as possible. Right there should be good. You want to split the difference between your bolt here. As far as this thread and this thread, you want to be the same and have this in the middle. So you want to have more tension on this thread rather than this thread. So you want it to be evened out. To get it where you want it, go ahead and thread your nuts down. This big one right here goes down to the shaft, so it locks that down. And then your gold one goes down to this nut right here, so it locks this down. Snug it down by hand. You ain't gotta tighten it down because you might need to adjust it when you go to put it on the car. But that's basically how you get them set up, ready to go on the car. And you're gonna take your stock bolts and put them in the tension rod. Like I showed you, you can remove them out using a press or by a hammer. On these particular tension rods, the gold nut is 24mm Your next one down is 23 millimeter. The next one down is 29 millimeter. And then the one on your tension rod here is 26 millimeter. After you have your studs out of your stock tension rods, you can put them in your new ones. Basically, you're just going to slide them in there like so, and then when you install them on the car, when you start threading the nut in, it'll pull it down. That'll put it in there all the way. Basically, when you're going to install your new adjustable tension rod, it goes on just the way you took the stocking off, except for your studs here. Of course, they're going to go on top of there. And go ahead and put your tension rod up on there. Go ahead and run the bolt through. The bolt goes through this way. And then you have the nut. You want to go ahead and put your studs on. And thread your nuts on the studs. You want to go ahead and thread your nuts on, and your stud will go down, just like pressing the stud into the tension rod. You can watch over to the side here and watch your stud go all the way down. The torque on your 17 millimeter nuts is 65 to 80 foot-pounds, and the torque on your 17 millimeter nut on this side is 65 to 80 foot-pounds as well. And after you get it torqued down, then you want to tighten your nuts down up here for your adjusters and snug them down real good. Okay, here on the front coilover, you have two 6 millimeter Allen bolts. You loosen them up and this shaft will spin on the bottom for your ride height. But if you have it installed in the car, you can either remove your two 17 millimeter bolts and nuts, or you can loosen them up and adjust it here. You'll take your spanner wrenches and you'll loosen up your lock nuts. One on this side, and put the other one on this side. Squeeze them together. These are already loose. But you loosen this one up. And basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to measure the bottom of your lock nut. Go ahead and slide it back up there. Measure the bottom of that to the top of here. That's where you're going to want to start out. Like I'm going to do 1 inch on this one, and then I'll do the exact same thing on the other side. So you loosen it up to where you get whatever reading you're wanting. Then you take your spanner wrench, and after you have these loosened up, you'll turn the whole shaft. You'll hold this piece right here, and you'll turn the whole shaft clockwise, tighten it this way so it'll go down. And when you get to your desired level, then you'll go ahead and tighten up your lock nut. If you want to tighten up your spring right here, then of course you'll turn it. You'll loosen up your nut here again. You'll turn this one to the right to make it shorter, or you'll turn this way to make it longer. Either way, you get your preload on there. And that's basically it. You want to tighten everything back down when you get on there. And as far as the backs, they're basically the same deal, except instead of the two 6 millimeter Allen bolts, it has another lock nut right here. So actually this one's a whole lot easier to do. You just loosen this lock nut up and turn this lock nut here either down or up, whichever way you want to go, and then lock it back down. And preload is exactly the same as the fronts on these back ones here. Again, on the backs, you want to measure from the bottom of your lock nut to the top of this lock nut, which these are 3 inches right here. You want to get the other side the exact same and start there. When you get everything on the car and then lower the car down and let it settle out, you might have to do a little bit of adjusting, but it should be pretty close as long as you got both sides the exact same. If you want to do like I'm doing, I have 3 inches on the back, 1 1/4 inches on the front. When going to adjust your camber on your front coilovers, you have 4 5 millimeter Allen bolts. You just need to loosen them up, and then if you pull it this way, you get plus camber, and if you push it this way, you get negative camber. Because if you push it this way, it's going to pull the tire in towards the motor, the top of the tire in towards the motor, which is negative camber. And if you push it towards the outside of the car, it brings the top of the tire to the outside of the car, which gives you plus camber. So just however you want to do it, whatever type of camber you want, that's your adjusters right there. Just loosen them up, move it, then snug them down. Okay, when you're going to install your coilover, it's basically the same deal as the shock and spring combo. You just put it in, mount your shock mount up top here. Go ahead and thread in your 3 14mm nuts up top. After you have your coilover installed on top and hanging, you're going to go ahead and put a jack underneath the lower control arm here. You can see where I have mine. And then you'll jack it up. And you're going to want to get your 2 bolt hole locations on the knuckle, line up with these 2 here. And go ahead and have your bolts and nuts and everything ready to install. It'd be best to have the other shock on the other side of the car taken off as well. It's probably going to help keep the tension off of it. Just jack it up high enough. Get your bolt installed in there. Actually, I got mine just a little too high. After you get one bolt installed, go ahead and thread a nut on there to hold it in place. And go ahead and lower the jack down. Before you go to install the bottom bolt, these D2 coilovers come with this little bracket that hooks the brake line to the coilover. It'll go through the last bolt and just hook it on like the stock shock would do, and the bolt just runs through it. And go ahead and line your bracket up, because your brake line's going to slide on here just like that. And it's going to come through the hole, and you take your hold down piece and come to the top. And that's basically what's going to hold it on like so. And you can snug your bolts down. Your 2 17mm bolts and nuts are torqued to 84 to 98 foot-pounds. Use your own judgment on that. I'm going 95 foot-pounds on mine, but use your own judgment. And your top 3 14mm nuts on top are 29 to 40 foot-pounds. I'm going to torque mine to 39 foot-pounds. Okay, when you're going to put your back coilovers on, first thing you want to do is put a jack underneath the arm right here, because you're going to need to jack it up a little bit like you did on the front. And then you want to bring your coilover in, stick in through the ruka, just like you did with the shocks and spring combo. And you have to take it up to the top and mount on one of your 12mm nuts up top. After you get your top 12mm nut hooked on and your coilover's in place, go ahead and get it lined up for the bolt. So you want to pull it back just a little bit and then take your jack and jack up on the arm a little bit. Make sure your coilover is pushed back enough so it won't be in the way. You want to pick up on it and slide your coilover on to the bolt there, the stud there. Take your concave washer, concave pointing outward. Take your 17mm nut, install it on. Go ahead and snug it down. The torque on your 17mm nut is 65 to 80 foot-pounds. I'm going to torque mine to 80 foot-pounds, but you need to wait till you have your tires on the car and on the ground so you can have load on it so it'll get proper torque. And same with the fronts, the two 17mm bolts and nuts. You need to do that as well, but it's near impossible to do without a lift, like I explained to you when we did the shocks and springs. Then next you want to go up top and install your other 12mm nut and tighten them both down and torque them to 12 to 14 foot-pounds. Okay, I'm on the left rear here. Your Ruka here has a 19mm bolt. It's actually a bolt that has a washer welded on, but it's offset because that's what adjusts your camber. And then on the other side there's a 17mm nut. On the front side here you have a 19mm nut and a 19mm bolt, and you'll remove that. But the main thing to do on this bolt here, since that's what you use to adjust your camber and everything, you want to take note the position of it, where it's at, because you're going to want to put it back on just like you took it off, so you can get as close to being in line as you can, so you can at least drive it to the shop to get a line. So you want to take note of where the location of that is. And as you see, mine has the hole on it right there pointing at 8 o'clock. And here you have your tow rod. It's a 19mm bolt with a 19mm nut. Then over here on the other side you have a 17mm nut, and on the other side you have a 19mm bolt, which on both sides of this one has a offset washer. Has one on this side and on the other side, so you need to make note of the position of those, because you need to keep them in the pretty much the exact same spot you take them off. Next thing we have in front of the Ruka is the traction rod. You have a 19mm bolt on this side, 19mm nut on the other side, and up front you have a 19mm bolt and a 19mm nut. You do not have any adjusters on those, so those are just straight bolts and nuts, and that will come off. Okay, when you're going to remove all your suspension parts back here, all your rear links, your Ruka rear upper control arm is a 19mm bolt and a 17mm nut. Again, it has the washer, welded on washer that's offset. Make sure you mark down and remember which location it is so you can put it back on. As far as this, if you're doing it by yourself, I'll just take your 19mm ratchet and rest it up onto the top here, and then take your 17mm nut off. You're definitely going to need a breaker bar for this. You want to take your Ruka off first, then you want to take your traction rod off, and then your tow rod on the bottom. Because if you don't take your Ruka off first, you won't be able to get the bolt out of your traction rods. You definitely want to shoot all this stuff with WD-40 or PB Blast, or let it sit for a while. And when you take your bolts and nuts off, you want to keep them in order and keep track of where they go. You also have another washer that goes on the opposite side. It has a notch on it, which I'll show you when you take the bolt out. It slides into on the bolt, slides in on the bolt, because that actually helps this side turn and adjust it the same way as on that side over there. You're going to leave your bolt in, because when you go to take this off, it's going to pull this down, so you want to leave it in just so it'll hold the tension of it. And on front here, I have a 19mm nut and a 19mm bolt. After you got all out, you can pull your Ruka straight out. You also want to keep track of which side the bolt and nut was on. Like on the front here, the nut was on this side and the bolt was on this side, and the same with back here. Here on the traction rod, you have a 19mm nut and a 19mm bolt, and the same on the front. And the nuts are on this side and the bolts are on that side. On this nut here, you're going to have to use a wrench because a ratchet and socket will not fit. Basically, as you see, I got a ratcheting wrench put on the bolt, and it's going straight down and hitting the arm down there. That's what's going to hold on, because I'm going to do all my loosening off the bolt over here. Again, you want to leave your bolt in so you can take the fronts off. You want to let your ratchet rest down here below. And again, pull the traction rod out. Okay, now on your tow rod, you have a 17mm nut on the right side here. On the left side, you have a 19mm bolt. You're going to need to use a regular socket on this side over here. I can't show you because it's hard to get to. But instead of a deep well, you just need a regular socket because there's not enough room to put a deep well on there. And it's going to basically hit the differential so you can loosen this side over here. And again, it has a washer so you can adjust the toe on it. Make sure you know where it's at so you can put it back on. The back side here is the side that has the washer that just hooks onto the bolt, and the bolt on the other side has the welded on washer, and that's what actually adjusts it. I'll show you that when I take it off too. It's just like the Ruka setup. Again, you want to leave your bolt in so you can remove this one on the end down here. You have a 19mm bolt and a 19mm nut. This one's going to be a little tough to loosen up because all your arms are already off and it's going to move around on you. And this side over here is just a straight bolt and nut. And after you get this off, you're going to want to put your knuckle up on a jack so it's not laying over, because basically the tension is going to be pulling on your brake line. You don't want to break your brake line. So while you're doing all this, you want to put the jack underneath your arm and hold this up. Okay, when you want to set up your adjustable Rukas, you have a 25mm bolt on this side, you have a 24mm nut on this side, and then you have your, basically your heim joint, your bushing, whatever you want to call it. The way I do it is I take it, sit on top of the stock one, I line the bolt hole straight up and down on the back side here as best as possible. Again, you're not going to get it dead perfect, you're just going to get it really close so you can drive it to the alignment shop and get it lined up. And after you get that set on there, you want to adjust your end down here. You want to pull it out or in, whatever it needs to be. And again on this, you're just looking straight down on it, trying to get as close as possible. Should be about right. And after you get it where you want it, you want to take your nut and snug it down. You want to make sure this is pointing straight up. You gotta snug it down. As well as this right here, so you'll be able to get the wrench on it. And you just snug it all down. I would not tighten it down completely until you get on the car, because you might have to adjust it, and at the same time it'll hold this piece in place so you can tighten this up. And then for your tow rods, they're basically the same as tension rods are going to be set up. You just want to take the stock bolt, run it through, try and get it leveled up as much as possible, like so. And this is going to have to come forward a lot. Again, you're going to want to split the difference from threads when you get to where you want it. And this is a 24mm nut, 27mm nut, and a 32mm nut. You want to go ahead and get your threads all lined up, get your bolts and nuts going where they need to be. You can go ahead and do your lining. When you get so far, you can take the other stock bolt, put it on the front side. As long as they both go in the holes and it's lined up good and not at an angle, it should be good. This one right here should be good. You want to thread this nut down to the shaft here. This nut threads down to the shaft, holds this on, and your gold nut threads down to this nut and holds this on. That's how they work. Again, just hand tighten them. As you can see how much thread I have on. This one right here has a little bit more thread showing than this one, but it's okay. It's a little bit thicker, so that'll be better. If you have to do it either way, put it on the thicker side rather than the thinner. Traction rods are going to be set the exact same way as your tow rods were. The nut sizes are exactly the same and everything. You want to do the same method. Put bolts through the stock one, line them up, and set it up that way. And split the difference on your threads. Now when they're set up ready to go. As far as your adjuster bolts, as you can see, it has the offset washer on it. Whereas the washer that goes on the other side has a little notch on the inside of it, and on the bolt there's a notch on the inside of the bolt that actually just slides on there. And when you go to tighten up this bolt and turn it, it turns it, it'll make it move around like that. That's basically how it works. You'll have your nut on, it'll be tightened down, you just loosen up the nut, and then you'll adjust the bolt, and then you'll tighten down the nut. You don't never tighten down the bolt, you tighten down the nut, you torque the nut. Because if you turn this, it's going to mess your adjustments up. And these are for the Ruka and the tow rods. They both have the exact same type of bolt and washer setup. Okay, when you're going to install your tow rod, I recommend installing your tow rod first. Remember, your bolt comes from the front of the car and goes toward the back of the car, and you want to remember which position it was in. For instance, mine was at 2 o'clock. Go ahead and put your rod up in there. Put your bolt through. Next, you want to take your washer and put your washer on. You go ahead and thread your nut on, but don't tighten it up. Okay, next you're going to want to hook the other side on. I'm going to pick your knuckle up. Again, this is going to pay off if you kept track of where your bolts and nuts went. Whereas on the back one here, the bolt comes in this way. Where on that side, the bolt went in that way. Go ahead and thread your nut on. Again, don't tighten any of this stuff up, just thread it on. Okay, next you're going to put your traction rod on. It'll be a little tight going in. Go ahead and thread your nut on. You're going to put this end on. Thread your nut on that side. On this one, the nuts was on this side and the bolts was on this side. Next will be your Ruka. Both the bolts go through this way and the nuts on this side. Don't forget your washer. Next, you want to go ahead and set up all your adjustable bolts to what your settings were before. Basically, all your arms should already been set up by now before. So all you have to do is snug all your nuts down on your adjusters and everything, and then torque all your bolts and nuts down to spec. And adjust your bolts on your Ruka for your camber up here, and then down here for your toe, on your tow rod. And you'll do the same thing on the other side. The torque on your tow rod in the back here is 57 to 72 foot-pounds. And again, you want to torque your nut, not the bolt. You want to have your bolt set up with your adjuster the way it was when you took it off. Up front here on your tow rod is 57 to 72 foot-pounds as well. Your Ruka, up here where your adjuster is 51 to 65 foot-pounds. Again, you want to torque your nut, not the bolt, and you want to have your bolt set up for your adjuster like it was when you took it off. On the front side here, it is 57 to 72 foot-pounds. The front here on your traction rod is 36 to 51 foot-pounds. And back here is 51 to 65 foot-pounds on your traction rod. That is the factory service mount torque on all the lengths. And you want to go ahead and snug up and tighten down all your nuts and everything for your adjusters. The one back here on the traction rod, you might want to remove your exhaust, your cap back there, so you can get to it easier, because it's tough to get to. And then do the same thing on the other side, and you should be good enough to drive it to the alignment shop to get it aligned. As far as the Rukas, this one I have in my hand is the S14 Ruka, and the S13 is on the car. As you see, the S13 goes all the way around both sides of the shop, where the S14 only goes around one side. So that'll show you the difference between them two. As far as your traction rods and your tow rods, they are interchangeable between the S13 and the S14. Okay, what we have here is we have subframe collars on this side, and on this side we have solid aluminum subframe bushings. These actually replace the stock bushings altogether. And then the subframe collars, actually you still leave the rubber bushing in and you just put these on top of it. These are basically, in my opinion, a band-aid, because the rubber bushing inside can still deteriorate and go bad, leaving these useless. But they are good to temporarily fix your subframe bushings if they're bad, until you get the time and the chance to replace them completely with solid aluminum bushings. But basically the way they work, this is the bottom plate for the back of the subframe, where this is going to go on the bottom of the subframe bushing. This is going to go up in it, and then you'll just bolt your nut up on the bottom of it like that. And it'll sit up inside the bushing just like so. Whereas on the solid subframe bushings, it's going to do the same thing. This is the bottom one because it has the concave on the bottom. It'll sit in there and bolt up into it just like so. And then for the fronts here, it'll be like that. It'll be the same deal. That's going to sit on there like so and bolt up in there. Just like the subframe bushings will do the same thing. They'll sit on there just like so. But then as far as the tops go, the tops, they have a lip on this side, and on this side they're flush, flat. This is actually what touches the car, the bottom of the car. It's going to go on just like that, and this is going to sit inside the bushing right here. And it has a slot in it, so you can just slide it right over the stud without removing the subframe completely. Whereas on the solid subframe bushings, you have to remove the subframe completely off the car and remove all the bushings out and everything. These are a whole lot easier and quicker to install, but I highly recommend using the solid subframe bushings over these. But for a temporary fix, these are good. Okay, when you're going to install your subframe collars, you want to put a jack underneath the differential, jack it up a little bit. You have a 17mm nut here on the back, which you'll remove it and you'll take this off. You have another one on the other side. And then come around front here, you have a 17mm nut here, and you'll have a 12mm bolt here, which holds this brace on. And then coming in, you have another 12mm bolt right there you can remove. And then I'll remove this whole brace right here. And you have the exact same thing on the other side. You have the one up here you need to take off. The one over here on the other side, you need to take off. And above that, it's hard to get under here. You have this L bracket here you need to take off. It's got 3 bolts on it. You want to take these 2 off first, and then take this one off here, because this one's going to drop your subframe right here. You'll have the bottom plate like this right here. And your whole plate will come off. You'll have your bracket on here and then your plate. Okay, basically what you're going to do after you get all your 17mm nuts and plates off, you want to lower the jack down probably about 2 inches or whatever, so you'll be able to get your collar over there, and it just basically slides over just like so. Get a better shot of this. The lip goes on the bottom. It's going to sit on there. It's going to go over the stud just like so, and make sure it's sitting in there. Lip should be sitting inside the subframe, and then that's installed. And then here on the fronts, it's the same deal. Slide them on there. Do not drop your subframe down all the way, or it will be a pain in the butt to get back up on the studs. Just drop down enough to get these on here. Like I actually have mine drop a little too much, but it's okay. But you just got to get enough, drop down enough just to get your collars on there. And then do the other side, and then you'll jack the subframe back up, and then you'll install your bottom ones. If you run into it where it's not jacking up on this side, take a rubber mallet, tap it up. Don't knock your collar off. And also to add, you do not need to remove your shocks on the subframe to do this. It's not required. But next you want to put your collar on your plate like so and install it onto the stud. It just slides right up in the bushing. So basically it's the exact opposite of removal. Go ahead and install your nut. Go ahead and snug it on there. Don't tighten it down, just snug it on there. Then you want to go to the front, do the same thing, go ahead and put your collar on top of your plate. Install your plate up onto the stud. Go ahead and thread your nut on there. You want to go ahead and snug down your 17mm nut, but you're going to push it. It's going to push the brace up into the collar, and then the collar up into the bushings. You want to take it all the way up, and then you can loosen it back down and get the 12mm nuts on your plates. As far as your 4 17mm nuts, the torque on them is 72 to 87 foot-pounds on all 4, fronts and the backs. Then your 2 12mm bolts on that side there and the bracket here on the front are 15 to 20 foot-pounds on both sides. And this is what they look like completely installed. Make sure you put everything back on like you took it off. Your nuts to your subframe, the front and the back, 17mm nuts, are 72 to 87 foot-pounds. Always go with the higher number, so I go 87 foot-pounds, but go with your own judgment on that. This is what we call the L bracket, which is known as the member stay. Your 17mm nut here is torqued to 72 to 87 foot-pounds. Your 2 14mm bolts are torqued to 32 to 41 foot-pounds. After you get done with your installing everything, we'll lower the car down. I'm going to lower the back before the front. So if you lower the front first, you won't be able to get the jack out from under it, because the back will still be up in the air. Show you what it looks like when you drop the car down from the front. We're at the cross member right now. I'm going to come down slowly. So if you got your car lowered a lot, even if you have a low profile jack like I have, it's going to want to hit it. When you get down so far, it's either going to want to hit the oil pan, the sway bar, or the front bumper, or the front lip on the front bumper. Which mine is right there at it. If you have coilovers and you're going in lower, which I'm sure you probably will if you have coilovers, it's going to be near impossible to get it off. See, as you can see, mine's hitting right now. But luckily I have a little broken piece on my lip right here. I'll be able to slide out through there. If I didn't have that, it wouldn't come out. Another thing you can do is you can have some ramps, low profile ramps, and you can lower it down on those and roll off of it, or you can use some 2x4s or 2x8s, probably like 3 or 4 of them stacked on top of each other and screwed together at an angle just like a ramp would be. That would be another method to do. As you can see, the car is lowered now.